Good morning. Hi. Okay, I'm told that we need to turn the volume up. Turn the volume up. Okay. We're going to work on this. Sorry for the sitting. I don't want to move this microphone more than is absolutely necessary. So our speaker is going to be seated as well. So if you can't see my face, you might want to shift your chair one way or another. Or feel free to pick a different seat. You're not married to where you're sitting right now. So welcome to Saturday Storytelling. We begin today's program by acknowledging that we are gathered today on the homeland of the Séliš and Qlispe people at a place they named Selis-Qlispe. Their example as the original stewards of this land guides our work today. Travelers Rest Connection is committed to respectfully sharing the history and contemporary culture of the indigenous people who lived and traveled through the ancient crossroads on this land. We learn from many indigenous artists, elders, and organizations. We invite you to learn from and support them as well. I want to say a quick thank you to everyone who makes these programs possible. The members of Travelers Rest Connection, MCAT, Missoula's community media resource, who provided a media assistance grant to record Saturday Storytelling each week this winter. Thanks also to Montana Public Radio, a trailblazer sponsor of the Connection in 2023. Gratitude, too, to Kathy Bartlett and Garth Cox for bringing treats today, and to Hunter Bay Coffee Roasters for donating coffee. We do need somebody to bring treats next week, so if you haven't signed up yet, please see me after the program. For our folks on Zoom, if you have questions for our speaker, please type them in the chat box on Zoom. It is helpful if you keep yourself muted and your video off during the presentation to preserve everybody's bandwidth. Galen will monitor the chat for questions and for any technical difficulties you might have. For folks in the room, please check that your cell phones are on silent mode. And now I am pleased to introduce today's speaker. Lucy Vanderburg is a member of the Selis-Qlispe Culture Committee. As a tribal elder, she provides guidance on many programs and practices, including Salish language classes, tribal history and ethnogeography projects, public educational outreach and presentations, gathering of traditional plants and foods, and development of cultural learning resources and materials. For many years, Lucy served as the director of the People's Center Museum in Pablo. Today, you can find lots of the artifacts that she helped to collect and preserve on display at Three Chiefs Culture Center in St. Ignatius. We are honored that she is here today to share her stories. Lucy. It's a big step. We're going to give you a boost.
Okay. Okay. And you said sit up.
Well, I sank a little. You might not sink as much as I did.
Okay.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Lemlemch. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Just being here. I woke up this morning and it was snowing in Polson. Wind was blowing and I thought, oh my gosh. But, so I am happy to be here. But I have to go back now. I guess my connection is what I would like to talk about first with my family in the Bitterroot. My father was Jerome Vanderburg. My mother, Agnes Adams Vanderburg. In 1891, my dad was a year old when the last band was moved from Stevensville to the Jocko in the Arley area. So the connection that we've always held on to, Stevensville, the Bitterroot area, was our homeland. And I can remember as a child still going back to the Bitterroot and camping in areas where they were familiar with. The Séliš, they had connections. The roots were in the Bitterroot. And we still go back, even now. The medicine tree. The medicine tree was, I think, I'm trying to find the word, but it wasn't just the Séliš who used the medicine tree. It was the Nespers, it was the Shoshone, Kootenai. A lot of people, I guess, wonder about the medicine tree. It's not that we go to the medicine tree. We're not, I guess we're not, praying to the tree. A lot of people think, that's, why would you do that? Why would you uphold this tree? The tree is a part of the creation stories that not only the Séliš, the creation stories interconnect with all the tribes. Coyote was responsible for the ram's horn that was embedded in the tree. And it's a story. Coyote was, I think, very instrumental with a lot of our culture and traditions, our medicines, our food. And I don't remember how many years ago, but the tree did, it fell, the original. And that was a sad day for the Séliš people. I was working at the People Center when that tree fell, and Marcia Cross got a hold of me, and she was down here, and she told me the story that the tree fell across the highway, and she wanted to know if I could bring somebody down, an elder. And I ended up bringing John Stanislaw down. He was from Camas Prairie. And on the way down, he was telling me that when he was just a child, he dreamt about that tree. And he asked his dad, he goes, "Where is this tree?" He said, "Can we go there?" And his dad told him, he said, "Maybe in the future, when you get older, you can be there, you can go down there." So his dad told him the whole story behind the tree. And it wasn't until that tree fell down that he was able to see the tree. I went to Camas Prairie and picked him up, brought him down, and he sang a song that he said when he was a child, he said that's when he first dreamt about this tree, he was singing this song. And when we got down to a tree, he said, all of a sudden that song just came to me, and we sang the song, and we offered up our prayers, and the highway department was in the process of removing a lot of the limbs that was across across the road. And some people said, what are we going to do now? The trees, there's about 6 feet, 8 feet still in the ground. But they moved the tree down the road north of the tree. They moved all the limbs and everything. And every year, the Selis-Qlispe Culture Committee, they do 2 trips a year as a group. Everyone's free to go down or any time. They do one in the spring and one in the fall, and it usually involves a lot of people. The Inkusum language school, Two Eagle School, Selis-Qlispe College. And the importance of the tree is something that we try to pass on or instill to our children, grandchildren, family members. It's a place, because of the history behind the tree with the coyote killing the ram that was chasing him. It became a place for, like I said before, not only the Séliš, the Kootenai, Nespers. Whenever they traveled through there, they always stopped and offered their prayers to the Creator for safe travels, good health, and that's what we try to get our children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren to understand that it's not like you're praying to the tree. It's like the tree has a connection with the spiritual Creator. And I think a lot of our children, I know I have 3 daughters, 8 grandkids, and 10 great-grandkids. And they, except for the real little ones, I think they all have a real good concept of what the tree is about. You can't. One of the elders that I worked with at the Culture Committee, Felicity McDonald, she always said, we know we're going to go down probably in April and probably in August or September. So when you do bring a gift to the tree, it shouldn't be just something that, spur of the moment, oh yeah, I'll take this. It should be something that you think about. Give it some thought of why you're taking this particular item. So we were always prepared for that. My mother, Agnes Vanderburg, she died in 1989, and she went every chance she could get. If the Culture Committee was going, if family members were going, she was always there. She broke her leg a year before she'd passed away. The doctor had, they casted her leg, and he said, at her age, we're not going to, put any pins in there or rods or anything. We're just going to let it heal. Set it and let it heal. I think he doubted that she would walk again. She broke her leg in like February. And she had this cultural camp up Valley Creek. It's about 14 miles from Arlee. She told the doctor, she goes, I usually move up there in May, the end of May, and she'll stay for the whole summer. She goes, you gotta have this cast off by the end of May because I'm going up to camp. And he just kind of, okay, Agnes, we'll, take care. So before we went to, before she went to camp, the culture committee had planned a trip to the medicine tree. And the cast had already come off, and she had a walker. We get to the medicine tree, and some people were helping her, and she said, I'm going to put, she called her walker her horse. She goes, I'm going to put my horse over here. And she goes, I'm walking up to the tree. So somebody had a hold of her arm, and it's not a big incline, it's probably like this. But she walked all the way up to the tree, and she was thankful that she was able to see that tree one more time without her horse, without a cane. And that following end of May, she moved up to camp, and that was good. She had a traditional cultural camp. I was able to, I think the last 5 years, I worked with the Selis-Qlispe Culture Committee, and I had this awesome boss, Clarence Woodcock. He said, you don't have to come into work every day. If you want to move to camp, that'd be fine for the whole summer. So that was great. I jumped at the chance, and I moved up, and my brother and I helped my mom with some of the things that she was doing up at camp. Thank you. The camp was open to anybody willing to be sincere about learning about the Séliš culture, Séliš traditions, Séliš language. It didn't matter to my mom if you were Séliš, Vanderburg, Kootenai, Nespers, white, black. The camp was open to everyone. She had visitors from, I can remember being up there and these busloads would pull up. We had a busload of Japanese students that came up there. And they They spent the whole afternoon there, talking with my mom, talking with me and my brother, and just the different campers that were there. Some of them were tanning hides, and some of them were doing other activities, so it was a well-spent afternoon. And at the end of, just before they left, they did some dancing for the ones that were at the camp. The camp was, to me, it was a peaceful, and it still is. It's very peaceful up there. You're not that far from either St. Ignatius or Arley, but it's far enough that in the woods that you feel like you're 1,000 miles from anybody. My cousin Myrna lives up there, not at the camp, but she loves it. She's a true Valley Creek person. When I do go to camp, it's a place where you can leave yourself. You don't get cell service up there, so you're not bothered with cell phone calls. It's a place where you can really enjoy the outdoors. My mom had that camp for over 17 years. Every year she'd spend 3 months up there, come back after Labor Day, and then she'd be preparing for the next year. There was, I don't know, so many activities that happened up at camp. Tribal health, mental health, different language instructors, the schools. A lot of people learned a lot of things up at camp. I'm the youngest of 14. They're just me and my sister now. And I look back on all the different family members that, my relatives, that we always congregated up at camp because we knew that's where my mom was. She was always open to people, just welcoming them. Coffee was always on, food was always available. Some people would come up there and stay the whole day, stay for the weekend, stay for a couple weeks. We've had people stay up there the whole time she was there, all summer. There was two people that come to mind. They were from England, and they were on a biking through the States. They get to Missoula, and then they were on their way to Glacier on bicycles. They heard about the camp, so they asked about how to get there. They ended up staying the whole camp time. Just two young men that just fell in love with the camp, doing all the different things, learning a lot of things. And the day they left, that was kind of sad, you know. I mean, they got their backpacks and everything on their bicycles, and they really didn't want to go, but they had to. And for years after that, they kept in touch with my mom. They'd write her letters, different places that they were and what they were doing. So she made a lot of friends up there. Not only local people, but people from everywhere. I always envied her because she was so I guess so at ease with talking to different people. She always told me, she said, when you talk to a group of people, she goes, it's going to come from your heart. And no matter if you know them or not, just think of them as future friends. Future friends that you'll see sometime down the road, and you'll be glad to see each other. So I learned everything I know from my mom and my dad, my grandmas, my aunts. We spent a lot of time in the woods, in the mountains. Growing up as a child, I couldn't wait for school to get out, because I knew as soon as school was out, we'd be camping instead of just weekends. Camping with Myrna and her grandma, my aunt. We were at home in the woods. And that was one of the things that, learning the language was part of my life. It was spoke every day, from the time I got up until the time I went to bed. I heard the Séliš language. A lot of people aren't that lucky. Both my mom and dad were full-blood, fluent speakers. We have language schools now, which are making, I think, great strides in bringing that language back, so we can have more fluent speakers. The Séliš language didn't have an alphabet, I think, until 1970, I want to say 78. The Selis Culture Committee started in 1974. And we were recording all the elders, just turning recorders on and having them talk about everything, anything. So then when we tried to transcribe these tapes using the English language, we'd end up with words that were pretty long, trying to get those sounds. Because in the Séliš language, you have words that come from the lower part of your throat, the guttural, and then words that come from the front. The ones that come from deep, they're hard to do in English language. How do you get the sound of which is in the Séliš language? Our director at the time, Johnny R. Lee, and I'll always be thankful to him for getting someone to introduce us to an alphabet. We tried a couple different alphabets, and we had a linguist from British Columbia who came down, and he would sit and listen to the elders. At that time, all the elders would sit around and talk in Séliš. And finally, he came up with the phonetic alphabet. We have 43 letters in our alphabet. And it's so much easier, ask Sally, it's so much easier to write a word using that alphabet. If you study the alphabet, you can read anything. To me, it wasn't hard to get into that using the alphabet. I don't know if it was because I'm fluent in the Séliš language, but the sounds and everything just came. I mean, it was like it was meant to be. We ended up with 43 letters. And I taught the Séliš language at the college and at the Culture Committee for many, many, many years. And it was fun teaching the Séliš language to learners, sincere learners who really wanted to learn the language. Teaching through everyday activities, like up at camp, whatever activity was going on, we would incorporate the language into that activity. And the same we tried at the Culture Committee. One of the requirements to work for the Culture Committee was you had to be fluent in the language. Over the years, that's changed a little bit, but it's still an important factor of the Culture Committee is to teach the language. They hold classes there. There are different levels of classwork. You know, and to understand a lot of our stories, a lot of our history, a lot of our activities, to really understand, knowing the language, hearing the language in those tapes from our elders, I think that you have to know the language to understand those tapes, where they're coming from. You can translate it, and you can read it, but you don't quite get that full meaning behind whether it's making a teepee, making moccasins, drying meat, or just conversing about everyday activities. You miss that fine edge, I guess, of when you hear it. When I listen to those tapes that they have, it just brings back a lot of real deep meaning. Teaching language, like I said, I have 3 girls. They learned more from my mom than they did me because they were around her more. They learned the language from her. And then later years from me. My grandkids, the language is being offered in some of the public schools, which is, I just applaud that. I have a great-grandson who's 6. And when he had these cards, playing cards, and he was counting. To me, he goes, they call me Loopy. It's supposed to be Tupia, but they call me Loopy. He says, look. So he's putting the cards down. He goes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then he'd pick them up and he'd go again. He was learning how to count, and this is a couple of years ago. So I took some cards and I started counting in Séliš. I said, "Nku esel chesle mus." He looks at me and he goes, "No, 1, 2, 3, 4." I said, "No, Nku esel chesle mus." We did this for back and forth. He was determined I was saying it all wrong. And finally he picked up on it. He goes, "Nku." I said, "Well, that's close enough." Esel. So now he can count to 10 in Séliš. He's in the 1st grade now, but just by repeating that to him, he picked it up just like that. I would like to see him get more into the language, because he's at 6 years old, he has no inhibitions, nothing. I mean, he just, whatever you tell him, he'll do it, you know. He wants to be an astronaut when he gets older. He was telling Myrna all about the astronaut. And he knows quite a bit. You know, you think about it, he's 6 years old, but he's remembering all this. They've had NASA people come to the school in Ronan, and he remembers a lot of that. So he told Myrna when he's up on the moon, he's going to wave at her. She said, "I'll wave back at you." And he goes, "Okay." Just matter of fact, okay. But, you know, I guess teaching the language is one of the things that should never end. We've worked with a lot of linguists. We've worked with a lot of different tribes. Tony Matina from the university was a big part of our first publishings of the Séliš language. Our alphabet, the examples, the words, we would come to his office every other week and go over what we wanted in our first publication, our vocabulary, our word lists. And that was fun. That was Tony Inkashola and myself and Dolly. Tony Matina was a great teacher. He was real patient. And we worked with Steve Eggestal from Hawaii. And he did a lot more for the language, I think, than we really expected from him. He actually lived in Missoula and worked with the Culture Committee for many years, I think 6 years. So the languages is kind of one of my things that I just love to do. A lot of people will call me And I got a question, how do you say this, how do you say that? So a lot of my phone calls will end up being half hour, hour, and then I have questions. I'll have to think back. One of my brothers, Joe, I could call him and ask him. He just assumed I knew. He goes, well, don't you know that? You know how brothers are, they. Well, no, that's why I'm calling you. How do you say this? And after he'd tell me, then it was like, okay, I remember that now. And there's times when people will ask me, well, how do you say this? I have to go away for a while and come back, and then I'll tell you. Because I don't speak it every day like I did before. I think that's where a lot of the learners, they never had that opportunity to hear the language spoken every day. But I'm so pleased with everything that's happening on the reservations, with the schools, with the different programs that they have going. Our language was on the verge of being lost. I don't think it is now, because a lot of it is recorded. I don't have that fear that one day nobody's gonna be speaking the language, because we will. When I guess when I think about coming from the Bitterroot, you know, my dad was a year old, him being moved to Arlie. The Bitterroot was always home to my dad, even though he was just a baby of 1 year old. So I think of it, the Bitterroot, as my homeland, even though I never did live here. We still make the trips down whenever possible. We've worked with the museum in Hamilton. We've, you know, just different places that you know, because there is a connection. I look at all these artifacts that you have here. These are beautiful. Those are the kinds of things that we need to keep that connection with the people everywhere. And if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to.
Yeah, I have one. It's on the language. In the years of interviewing elders, the most common thing they would say to me, if they were first language speakers, would be, I wish I could tell you this in my language. English just does not have the same words. And so if you could help us understand what's in the gap in between, what are the things, I know this is a huge question, but if there's any slight way you could help us understand what English speakers, where we're so static and we're so noun-based, and what's the limitation, and what might we know if we understood Séliš?
I think it, well,
I feel it, but I don't have words for it other than it's more alive, is how I experience what people are saying to me, but I know there's so much I miss because I speak English.
well, I guess from my perspective, teaching the language for all those years, I'm not sure. Hearing the language every day, it was part of your life, whether you were being told to behave yourself, go to school. That was part of, it was just part of your life. Like, I lived it. And you heard it every day, so English wasn't, I mean, you knew English because you had to go to school, but in the morning, we heard the language up until we got on that bus. We heard English all day. Get off that bus and go home, and then you hear the language. So it's kind of, it becomes, I'm not sure how to explain that.
Say it in Séliš.
Maybe take one word and then show them how it breaks down into all the roots that are connected to other meanings.
Okay, like the word for store. I mean, that's a new Séliš word, a new word that we put together. So when we say "sentumisten," that's store. SN is a place. To me is to buy. And sten enforces the place. A place to buy things. A lot of our words are that way. The birds, the plants, the flowers, the trees. If you take a word and break it down, you get what it is before you could even pronounce it right. Sentumisten, a place to buy things. A lot of our words are new words. Like car. A car was a made-up word. And they looked at the car, it's bepoischen, and that has to do with the tires, the tread on the tires. Bepoi, and then shun is the actual car, the actual where the tires are attached to, I guess. So if you know the alphabet and you come up with bepoischen, everybody knows what you're talking about. You're talking about a car, but you're not talking about the tires. It's the car itself.
What are you saying about the tires? What are they called?
The tires itself? you put a CH in front of ocean, makes it the ownership, ocean. That's the tires by themselves. Sometimes the language can get confusing, but I love it.
We have a question on Zoom, Tam. I'll repeat it up here.
Okay, so I have a question from Chris Weatherly. They're asking, what's happening with the People's Center?
The question is, what's happening with the People's Center? And I don't know if they're asking about the building where the People's Center was in Pablo, or if they're talking about Three Chiefs Culture Center, but maybe you could answer both.
It was called the People's Center when it was in Pablo, and that burned down three years ago. And they moved them to St. Ignatius, and from what I understand, they're going to move them again. It's no longer called the People's Center. It's Three Chiefs, and I'm not sure exactly. I don't think they are either. They want to build like a museum with all the, the correct climate, the fire suppression, all the, like a regular museum. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future, but they are moving them from St. Ignatius back to Pablo, not to the original place in Pablo, but back to Pablo.
I'm gonna follow that up sort of with a question. When you worked at the People's Center, what was the, it's right on that corridor. Tourists driving the glacier would stop in. What was the main message that you wanted to get across to folks who were driving through the reservation but didn't really realize it?
I think we saw it because there was, there's 3 different tribes that live on the reservation: the Séliš, Ponderay, and the Kootenai. And we wanted to convey all 3 tribes living within these boundaries, which we didn't have before. The different traditions, the cultural aspect of living on a reservation with 3 different tribes together. And we tried, we had a small museum at the People's Center then. We tried rotating the artifacts every 3 months, giving people a chance to see things like this, like what you have here. We had classes in language, we had classes in different activities, the games. We had different games at the different schools. The public schools could come there, and we teach them how to play games. And
so I have to tell you my best memory of the People's Center, the building in Pablo, when we worked together on a culture camp for middle schoolers from the Bitterroot Valley and from the reservation. The kids in Pablo taught me how to play shinny, and the moms taught me how to make fry bread. It was the best weekend ever.
Well, thank you.
Do you have any more questions on Zoom? Anybody in the room have any questions for Lucy?
Oh, Tano.
I know that you've sort of experienced a lot of the different phases of the culture and how it is. And right now, you're seeing so many kids learning the language in school and this revival of culture. What makes you most excited about this? What do you sort of hope this will evolve into in the future? What do you want to see as this grows and gets bigger and better?
One of the things I want to see is more of the language being spoken everywhere. You know, whether you're in the store, you're in school, you're driving down the road. When I was teaching at the college, I went into the store, and I'm looking at things, and all of a sudden I hear somebody tell me in Séliš, "Hello, Lucy," and I'm in a store, and I thought, oh my God, somebody's talking to me. It was on TV. I don't know how they did it, but they brought up this program that during my class, and actually was able to talk to me while I was in the store. And it's like, yes, that's what it's all about. When you see people in the store and they greet you, that's great. That's what I hope for. I hope that there's a lot more fluent speakers that are comfortable enough to speak to you in Séliš, no matter where you're at.
Question here?
Was there ever any formal, where they tried to extinguish the Séliš language like they did with the boarding schools and things? Did you ever experience that?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, like, you know what I mean?
Well, I think the question is, in your family's history, did folks experience the efforts like by the boarding schools or the government to extinguish the language? Did it feel like, and I think in some ways, you know, were your family rebels for keeping the language going? Or, you know, how did the Vanderburg family experience that?
I think so. I'm 77 right now, and I learned the language. That was my first language. And then over the years, you know, you go off to school, you do this, you do that. When I graduated high school, I went to Chicago and went to school. And when I came back, it was like stepping back in time. You walk in the house and everybody's talking Séliš, you know, I mean, it was everyday conversation. My mom, she went to school. She started out in the first grade with the Sisters of Charity, I think it was part of the Ursuline. She went to the fourth grade, and then she got really sick. She had tuberculosis, so they took her out of school, and she said, like it was real sporadic. She'd go back for a while, and then when she finally was over the tuberculosis, she just never went back. So she didn't have a whole lot of schooling. My dad went to school with in St. Ignatius with the Jesuit fathers, but then I think he said he went as far as the 6th grade, 7th grade. My mom said that when she first started at the school, she was 6. They weren't allowed to talk Séliš, even though they were all Séliš. They were reprimanded if they got caught talking Séliš. She said sometimes, you know, she said being hit on the hand with a ruler. So they would, during their break time, their recess, 3 or 4 little girls would get together and they just visit, you know. But she said they had to be careful, but they didn't want to get caught.
What story, what piece of Séliš history did your father or mother repeat to you the most?
Just so people can hear, the question is, what story or piece of Séliš history did Lucy's parents repeat to her the most often?
That's a hard one because there was a lot. I mean, everything that we did every day was a part of life. We knew all of our relatives, whether they lived close by or not. We were taught, just like any other home, we were taught respect. We were taught, you know, the traditional values of, I guess, we didn't look at it as being Indian. We just knew who we were, you know. I guess the most important part was our history of, and that's where our elders, the history behind where we came from, and you know, we came from the Bitterroot. We knew all of those different people that were involved in the bands in the Bitterroot. Last fall, I was really honored and humbled when they named that bridge in Missoula Bear Tracks Bridge. My name, my mom always, my dad always said that we were Bear Tracks. And I toyed with the idea of changing my name from Vanderburg to Bear Tracks. But then I didn't. To me, that knowing our history, knowing our family, that was one of the things that was, I shouldn't say pointed out, that's how we lived. That's how, it wasn't one thing that they kept reminding us of. We lived that way, we learned that way, and we grew up that way. That's what I tried to instill on my kids, my grandkids. There isn't that many full-bloods on the reservation. I happen to be one of them, but and I'm very proud of that. I don't know if I answered your question. Okay.
We have another one from Zoom. Yes.
Their name is David Schwab, and the question is, were flutes historically used by the Séliš?
Dave Schaub is one of our volunteers who teaches field trips here, and he wants to know about flutes, the playing of flutes in Salish culture.
Okay. My dad played the flute, and he's got some recordings out there. And I never learned how to play the flute. My brothers did, my sister, but you think I could? I don't know, I'm not that musically inclined. But my dad played the flute. He made flutes. I know how to make them, but I just don't know how to play them. He had a song that he played, and he would always play it for my mom. And I thought that was so sweet. And it was it was a love song. And years later, after my dad had passed away, whenever my mom would hear that, she'd get really emotional. And I could understand why, because it was a beautiful song. Flute music is very touching to me because I heard it all the time.
Another question here.
Is the Vanderburg camp still running at this time, and who is running it if you're not able to anymore?
Sort of, and sort of not. It doesn't, I guess it doesn't run the way it did before. Myrna, who's my cousin, has camps up there. And the last two that I went to were just amazing. I really had a good time.
I grew up in Ronan, and the Séliš influence in Ronan is the greatest. But I know that there was more of the Kootenai influence up north. But Nez Perce, I have no knowledge of the Nez Perce there. Is there a presence for that tribe somewhere in the valley more so than other places?
I'm just going to repeat the question for folks who might not have heard it on Zoom, which is a question about the Nez Perce presence in the Jocko, or up on the Flathead Reservation. And how has that culture, does the culture have a presence up there? As opposed to, and we know it here, but I don't know.
Yeah, the Nez Perce. There's a lot of, because of intermarriages with Nez Perce and Séliš, Nez Perce and Pend Oreille, there is people up there that have Nez Perce, they have Kootenai, they have my great aunt was Nez Perce. She married into the Adams family. And it was so, my mom knew after a while, my mom knew the Nez Perce language, not fluently, but she could converse with her. And to me, it was some of the words that she would say. I didn't know what she was saying, but you could sort of figure them out. Kind of like the Séliš language. If you knew bits and pieces, you could kind of figure out what they were saying. And I think there's a lot of people on the reservation that do have Nez Perce blood in them.
Thank you. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, and we've kept you a long time, I appreciate that, Lucy. I did want to make a couple of shameless plugs. First of all, for your mom's book. This was published by the Culture Committee, and we have it for sale here in the gift shop. This is it's a transcription, I think, of a conversation with your mom. And for those who can't see it very well, it's called Coming Back Slow, The Importance of Preserving Salish Indian Culture and Language by Agnes Vanderburg. So this is one way that we help to support the tribe and the Culture Committee by selling their publications here. So do the same, buy them. I also wanted to just make a couple of quick notes. Also to raise money for Travelers Rest Connection. People here on your seats, you will see, and folks who are online, you can check out our website. We are selling some special t-shirts for 2023, and the design is there. It was made by one of our Vista member, Galen, who designed the t-shirt and helps to support programs like these at the park. And also on March 4th, we are going to be having a volunteer open house. So if there's anybody here that's interested in sharing their stories, sharing the stories of Travelers Rest with school kids or visitors, please come and learn more about how you can volunteer here. And with that, again, a big thank you to Lucy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.